My son called me useless in front of his friends. I stayed silent. 1 week later, he lost his job and came home devastated. That's when I handed him a business card with his new boss's name on it. The name was mine. You know that moment when someone you love completely destroys you with their words, and you just stand there, frozen, wondering how you got to this place? That was me last month, holding a tray of sandwiches I'd made for my son's friends, listening to him tear apart everything I'd worked for in my life. But before I tell you how this story ends with my 23-year-old son crying in our living room, begging for forgiveness, let me introduce you to the players in this disaster. First, there's me, Marcus Chen. I'm 48, divorced for 8 years now, and I've been raising my son Tyler alone since his mother decided family life wasn't exciting enough for her. I wake up at 5 every morning, work until 7 most nights, and drive a 10-year-old Honda Civic that Tyler constantly complains about. To him, I'm just another middle-aged guy in khakis who pushes papers around some boring office building downtown. What Tyler doesn't know could fill a book, but we'll get to that. Then there's Tyler Chen, my son, my pride and joy, and apparently my biggest critic. He's fresh out of college with a business degree and a chip on his shoulder the size of Texas. He works at some mid-tier marketing agency called Pinnacle Marketing. Makes decent money for a kid his age, but acts like he's running Wall Street. Tyler lives at home to save money, which is smart, except he spends most of his time complaining about our pathetic house and my dead-end career. He's got this group of college friends who all seem to have wealthy parents, and Tyler's constantly comparing me to them. Spoiler alert, I never measure up in his eyes. Speaking of those friends, let me tell you about Jake Morrison and Brian Walsh. These two work in finance, drive cars their daddies bought them, and never miss an opportunity to talk about money. Jake's father owns a chain of car dealerships, and Brian's dad is some hotshot lawyer. They're not bad kids, really, just privileged in a way that makes them completely oblivious to how the real world works. They love coming over to our house because, and I quote Tyler here, "At least my dad doesn't lecture us about responsibility like yours do." If only they knew. The thing is, I could have given Tyler everything those boys had. I could have bought him a BMW instead of making him save up for his used Toyota. I could have moved us to a mansion in the hills instead of staying in our comfortable but modest 3-bedroom house. I could have sent him to Europe for spring break instead of letting him work construction summers to pay for his own trips. But I chose not to. I chose to let my son think his father was ordinary, unremarkable, forgettable. I thought I was teaching him humility, work ethic, the value of earning things yourself. I thought I was being a good father by not handing him everything on a silver platter. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was right about one. Tyler needed to learn respect. He just had to learn it the hard way. See, what happened that Friday night changed everything between us. Tyler said words that cut deeper than anything his mother ever threw at me during our divorce. Words that made me question 20 years of sacrifice, 20 years of putting him first, 20 years of building something incredible while trying to raise a good man. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It gives you a solid foundation to build on. And sometimes, when someone you love thinks you're useless, you have to show them exactly how useful you really are. The business card I handed Tyler had a logo on it, Chen Digital Solutions, a company he'd never heard of, with a CEO he'd never respected, offering him a job he didn't know he desperately needed. My name was on that card, my company, my rules. And Tyler's face when he realized who his father really was? That moment made everything worth it. Every insult, every eye roll, every time he called me useless in front of his friends. Because sometimes the best lessons come wrapped in the worst pain. And sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who need to humble us the hardest. This is that story. Let me paint you a picture of my life before everything changed. Every morning at 5 a.m., my alarm goes off in the same modest 3-bedroom house I bought 15 years ago in Riverside Heights. a middle-class neighborhood where the lawns are neat, the cars are practical, and nobody asks too many questions about what you do for work. I stumble to the kitchen, make coffee in a machine I bought at Target, and check my emails on a laptop that Tyler constantly mocks for being ancient. What he doesn't see are the messages from department heads, client reports showing seven-figure deals, and board meeting agendas that would make his finance buddies weep with envy. By 6 a.m., I'm showered, dressed in the same kind of khakis and button-down shirts I've worn for years, and heading out to my Honda Civic. Tyler usually rolls out of bed around 8:30, stumbles downstairs in his boxer shorts, grabs whatever I've left him for breakfast, and makes some comment about how pathetic it is that I'm already gone. "Normal dads don't leave for work before sunrise, Dad," he told me once. If only he knew that some mornings I'm flying to Seattle or Phoenix for meetings with CEOs who hang on my every word. Chen Digital Solutions started 8 years ago in our garage. Tyler was 15 then, dealing with his mother walking out on us, and I was determined to build something that would secure his future without him ever having to worry about money. Those first 2 years, I worked 18-hour days, coding until my eyes burned, making sales calls until my voice was hoarse, all while making sure Tyler had everything he needed: soccer cleats, school supplies, gas money for his first car. The irony is that as my company grew, I made a conscious choice to live smaller. Not because I had to, but because I remembered my own childhood. My parents came here from Taiwan with nothing, worked 3 jobs each, and never let success change who they were. They taught me that wealth without character is worthless, and I wanted Tyler to learn that same lesson. So when Chen Digital Solutions landed its first $1 million contract, I didn't move us to a mansion. When we hit $10 million in revenue, I didn't trade in my Civic for a Tesla. When Fortune magazine wanted to do a feature on America's hidden tech titans, I declined. I watched other parents in Tyler's school pick up their kids in Maseratis, vacation in Europe every summer, and hand their children credit cards with no limits. And every day I chose differently. Tyler, meanwhile, grew up thinking his dad was just getting by. He'd come home from Jake's house and ask why we didn't have a pool like the Morrisons. He'd complain that Brian's family had a vacation house in Aspen while we went camping at state parks. Last Christmas, he actually asked me if I'd ever considered applying for a better job somewhere. "Dad, you're smart enough," he said, not looking up from his phone. "You could probably manage something bigger than whatever boring office stuff you do now." I just nodded and asked if he wanted more coffee. The hardest part wasn't Tyler's criticism. It was hiding who I really was every single day. You know how exhausting it is to pretend you're ordinary when you spend your days making decisions that affect hundreds of employees? To act like a $40,000 salary is your ceiling when you're looking at quarterly profits that could buy 10 houses like ours. But I told myself it was worth it. Tyler was learning to work hard, save money, be grateful for what he had. At least, that's what I thought. The reality check came gradually. Tyler started bringing Jake and Brian around more often, and I noticed how he acted differently when they were here. Apologetic, almost. Like he was embarrassed by our normal house, our normal furniture, his normal dad who worked normal hours at a normal job. "Your dad seems nice," Jake said to Tyler once, and I'll never forget Tyler's response. "Yeah, he tries. He's just not very ambitious, you know. Some people are okay with average." That night, I sat in my home office. Tyler thinks it's where I pay bills and watch Netflix, and stared at the wall covered in awards from the Tech Innovation Council, photos with senators and CEOs, and a framed copy of our IPO filing that we never executed because I valued privacy more than public recognition. Average. That's what my son thought of me. The man who'd built an empire while packing his lunches and helping with homework every night for 8 years. I should have corrected him then. But I thought I had more time to teach him humility before revealing the truth. I was wrong. The night that changed everything started like any other Friday. Tyler texted me around 5 saying Jake and Brian were coming over to watch the game and could I maybe order some food or something. Not, "Dad, would you mind?" or "Thanks for letting us hang out at your place." Just an expectation that I'd provide, like always. I stopped at the grocery store on my way home from a board meeting where we'd just approved a $12 million acquisition. 20 minutes earlier, I'd been discussing market expansion strategies with executives who called me sir and took notes on my every word. Now, I was buying chips and sandwich meat for my son's friends, who saw me as the guy who couldn't even afford to order pizza. When I got home, Tyler was in the living room setting up the TV while Jake and Brian lounged on our couch like they owned the place. "Hey, Mr. Chen," Jake called out. "Thanks for letting us crash here again." "Yeah, thanks," Brian added, barely looking up from his phone. "Your place is so comfortable." I knew that pause. Comfortable meant small. Ordinary, not impressive. "No problem, boys," I said. "I'll make some sandwiches." Tyler didn't even acknowledge me. He was too busy explaining why our TV wasn't as big as the one at Jake's house. "My dad's not really into upgrading things," he said with that apologetic tone I'd grown to hate. "He's pretty practical about money." Practical. Another word that stung more than it should have. I went to the kitchen and started preparing food, listening to their conversation drift from the living room. They were talking about their jobs, their salaries, their futures. Jake was bragging about his dad buying him a condo downtown. Brian was planning a ski trip to Colorado that his father was funding. "So, Tyler," Jake said, "when do you think you'll move out of here? I mean, living at home is smart for saving money, but—" "Soon," Tyler replied quickly. "I'm just waiting for the right opportunity. Unlike my dad, I actually have ambition." That word hit me like a physical blow. Ambition. As if building a $50 million company from nothing while raising a child alone showed a lack of ambition. But it was Brian's next question that set everything in motion. "Speaking of dads, what does your father actually do, Tyler? You never really talk about his work." I froze at the kitchen counter, sandwich halfway made, waiting for Tyler's response. This was his chance. His opportunity to say something kind, something respectful, something that acknowledged the man who'd worked every day for 23 years to provide for him. Tyler laughed. Not a nice laugh. An embarrassed, bitter laugh that made my stomach drop. "Oh, my dad? He's just some useless office drone pushing papers around. Probably makes less in a year than your dad spends on golf memberships." The mayonnaise jar slipped from my hand, but I caught it before it hit the floor. Useless. My son had called me useless. Jake laughed uncomfortably. "Dude, that's harsh. At least he's trying, right?" But Tyler wasn't finished. This was his moment to really perform for his friends, to distance himself from his disappointing father. Trying? The man has zero ambition, zero drive. He's been doing the same boring job for years, driving the same embarrassing car, living in the same average house. I'm honestly embarrassed to call him my father sometimes. Good thing I won't end up like him. Useless and forgotten. Useless and forgotten. I stood there in my own kitchen, holding sandwich meat I'd bought with money from a company that employed 200 people, wearing a shirt I'd chosen specifically because it wouldn't intimidate Tyler's friends, and I felt something break inside my chest. 23 years of sacrifice. 8 years of single parenthood. Countless nights I'd stayed up helping with homework while answering emails from clients. Every birthday party I'd attended, every soccer game I'd cheered at, every college expense I'd covered without question. All of it reduced to useless and forgotten, so my son could get a laugh from his friends. Brian must have sensed the cruelty because he said, "Come on, man. He seems like a good guy." But Tyler was on a roll now. Good? He's mediocre. He's the definition of settling for less. Do you know how frustrating it is to have a father with no vision, no success, no anything worth respecting? I quietly set down the tray I'd been preparing and walked to my home office. I closed the door, sat in my chair, the same chair where I'd made decisions that shaped entire industries, and I made a phone call. "Linda," I said to my assistant, "I need Tyler Chen's employment file from Pinnacle Marketing. Full review by Monday morning." It was time my son learned what useless really looked like. That weekend was the longest of my life. Tyler went out both Friday and Saturday night with Jake and Brian, coming home after midnight, laughing loudly enough to wake me up. Each time I heard his voice, I heard the echo of those words: useless and forgotten. Sunday morning, I sat in my home office with Tyler's employment file spread across my desk, all like evidence in a trial. What I found made my stomach turn, but not with hurt this time, with disappointment so deep it physically ached. Tyler's performance reviews painted a picture I didn't recognize. Late to work, an average of twice per week. 3 formal complaints from supervisors about his attitude and unwillingness to accept feedback. Multiple instances of him telling colleagues that certain tasks were beneath him because he had a college degree. The most damning entry came from his direct supervisor, Sarah Mitchell. Tyler consistently demonstrates an entitled attitude and shows little respect for company protocol. He frequently mentions that his current position is temporary until something worthy of his talents comes along. Recommend performance improvement plan or consideration for termination. I leaned back in my chair, the same chair where I'd built partnerships with Fortune 500 companies, and realized I'd failed as a father in ways I never imagined. I'd been so focused on teaching Tyler humility through hiding my success that I'd never taught him basic respect for other people's hard work, including mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. "Going to brunch with the guys. Need $40 for my share. Can you Venmo me $40? To the son who called me useless, from the father he didn't know could buy the restaurant they were eating at. Instead of sending money, I made another call. "Richard," I said to Richard Pemberton, CEO of Pinnacle Marketing, and a man who'd been trying to get Chen Digital Solutions as a client for 2 years. "Marcus Chen here. I've been thinking about that partnership we discussed." "Marcus, this is unexpected. I thought you weren't interested in working with marketing agencies." "I'm reconsidering. But first, I need to understand how your company operates, your employee standards, your management philosophy. I believe in thoroughly vetting potential partners." What Richard didn't know was that Pinnacle Marketing had been on my radar for months. Not for partnership, but because they'd been struggling financially and desperately needed a major client to stay afloat. Chen Digital Solutions could save them or destroy them with one decision. "Of course," Richard said eagerly, "we pride ourselves on maintaining the highest standards: professional excellence, accountability, team collaboration." "Tell me about your team evaluation process. How do you handle underperforming employees?" "We're actually in the middle of our quarterly reviews now. We believe in giving everyone a fair chance, but ultimately, we can't carry deadweight, especially with the economic pressures we're facing." "Perfect. I'd like to schedule a visit this week, Monday perhaps. I want to see your operation firsthand, meet some of your key players." After I hung up, I opened my laptop and pulled up Tyler's social media. Photo after photo of him at expensive restaurants, bars, concerts, all funded by money he borrowed from his useless father. Captions like "living my best life" and "work hard, play harder," and my personal favorite, "success is a mindset, not a handout." Success is a mindset. This from a young man who was about to be fired for poor performance and bad attitude. I spent the rest of Sunday planning. Not revenge, that's too small a word for what I was feeling. Justice, education, a masterclass in consequences that Tyler desperately needed. Monday morning, I dressed more carefully than usual. Not my typical khakis and button-down, but a tailored suit I usually reserved for investor meetings. Tyler was still asleep when I left for Pinnacle Marketing. Richard greeted me in their lobby with the enthusiasm of a man who saw his company's salvation walking through the door. Marcus, welcome to Pinnacle Marketing. I can't tell you how excited I am about this potential partnership. I'm looking forward to learning more about your company culture, I said, shaking his hand, especially how you handle employee accountability. As Richard led me through the office, I saw Tyler's desk. Family photo from his college graduation, him and me at the ceremony where I'd watched him cross the stage, bursting with pride for my son who was about to start his professional life. The same son who would call me useless 6 months later. Next to the photo was a coffee mug that read, Future CEO. Richard noticed me looking. That's Tyler Chen, one of our junior associates, bright kid, lots of potential, though he's been struggling lately with some performance issues. Performance issues? Between you and me, he's got an attitude problem, acts like he's too good for entry-level work. His father probably filled his head with unrealistic expectations about how quickly success comes. I almost laughed. If only he knew. What are you planning to do about it? Richard sighed. We'll probably have to let him go this week. We can't afford to keep someone who doesn't respect the work or the people around him. I understand completely, I said. Sometimes people need to learn respect the hard way. That afternoon, I had my assistant prepare employment contracts for Chen Digital Solutions. Not for Tyler, not yet, but for when he was ready to learn what real work looked like. Tuesday started like any other day. I left for work at my usual time, kissed Tyler goodbye while he was still half asleep, and told him to have a good day at the office. He grunted something in response, probably annoyed that I'd woken him up 30 minutes before his alarm. At 11:15 a.m., my phone rang. Richard Pemberton's name flashed on the screen. Marcus, I wanted to give you an update on that employee situation we discussed yesterday. We had to let Tyler Chen go this morning. The attitude issues finally came to a head when he argued with his supervisor about a project deadline, said the work was beneath someone with his education level. I closed my eyes and felt something twist in my chest. Pride, disappointment, relief, maybe all three. I'm sorry to hear that, Richard, but you're right. Respect is non-negotiable in business. Absolutely. Anyway, I wanted you to know we're cleaning house before we potentially move forward with our partnership discussions. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, staring out the window at downtown, watching people hurry to meetings and lunch appointments. Somewhere out there, my son was probably sitting in his car in a parking garage, trying to figure out how to tell his friends and his father that he'd been fired. I went home early that day. Not because I wanted to gloat, but because I knew Tyler would need me, even if he didn't know it yet. I got there at 4:30 and found him sitting on our couch, still in his work clothes, staring at the TV without really watching it. His face was red and blotchy, like he'd been crying, and for a moment, my resolve almost cracked. This was my little boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee, who'd made me Father's Day cards with crayon drawings of us holding hands. Hey, buddy, I said softly. You're home early. Tyler looked up at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Genuine vulnerability. Not the cocky young man who called me useless, but my scared son who needed his dad. They fired me, Dad. His voice cracked on the words. They said I wasn't a good fit for the company culture. I don't know what I'm going to do. Rent, student loans, car payment. I'm completely screwed. He put his head in his hands, and I saw his shoulders shake. Jake and Brian are going to think I'm such a loser, and you, God, Dad, you work so hard just to keep us afloat, and I can't even hold down a basic job. For the first time in months, Tyler was seeing me as someone who worked hard, not someone who was useless. I sat down next to him on the couch, our old, embarrassing couch that I could have replaced with Italian leather years ago. Tyler, I need to tell you something about what you said last Friday night. He looked up, confused. What do you mean? I heard you, in the kitchen, when you told Jake and Brian that I was useless, that you were embarrassed to call me your father. Tyler's face went white. Dad, I didn't know you heard that. I was just what? Just being honest. Because if that's how you really see me, we need to address that. I don't know why I said those things, Tyler whispered. I was showing off, trying to sound cool. I didn't mean it. Words have consequences, son, and so do attitudes, which brings me to this. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a crisp white business card. Your new boss is waiting to meet you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Tyler took the card with trembling hands. I watched his eyes scan the text, watched his expression change from confusion to shock to something that looked like terror. Chen Digital Solutions, he read aloud. Marcus Chen, CEO and founder. He looked up at me, his mouth open. Dad, what is this? Is this a joke? I built this company from nothing while raising you alone, Tyler. We have 200 employees and annual revenue of $50 million. Pinnacle Marketing, they're one of our clients. I could have saved your job with one phone call, but I wanted you to learn something about respect. Tyler stared at the card like it might explode in his hands. You're a CEO? You own a company? The same useless father who's been supporting you for 23 years just offered you a job. The question is, are you going to take it seriously this time? Or are you going to tell your next supervisor that the work is beneath someone with your education level? Tyler started crying then. Not the embarrassed tears from getting fired, but deep, body-shaking sobs of someone who just realized how completely wrong they'd been about everything. Dad, I'm so sorry. I said such terrible things. I thought I was so wrong about everything. Yes, I said quietly. You were. We sat in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Tyler clutched that business card like it was the last piece of solid ground in an earthquake that had just reshaped his entire world. Finally, he looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Dad, how long have you been successful? I started Chen Digital Solutions 8 years ago, the same year your mother left us. 8 years? Tyler's voice cracked. You've been wealthy for 8 years, and you let me think we were struggling? We were never struggling, son. You were learning. Learning what? How to be ashamed of my own father. How to disrespect the man who was providing for me. Tyler stood up and started pacing, the business card still gripped in his fist. Do you know how many times I complained about our house, our car, your job? God, Dad, I told people you were a failure. I know. I heard more than just Friday night. Tyler stopped pacing and stared at me. You heard other times? Tyler, you've been criticizing my lack of ambition for 2 years. Every comment about my boring job, my old car, my average life, I heard all of it. Then why didn't you stop me? Why didn't you just tell me the truth? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our neighborhood, the same neighborhood Tyler had called embarrassing countless times, because I wanted you to learn respect for regular people, for hard work, for the value of what you have. I thought if you grew up humble, you'd become a better man. Instead, I became an entitled brat. I turned back to face him. Yes, you did. Tyler flinched like I'd slapped him, but he needed to hear it. But, I continued, that doesn't mean it's too late to change. Is the job offer real? It's real. Junior Marketing Associate. Chen Digital Solutions. Same salary you were making at Pinnacle, same benefits. But Tyler, understand this, you'll be starting at the bottom. You'll answer phones, file reports, make copies, and do whatever your supervisor tells you to do. No special treatment because you're my son. If anything, you'll be held to a higher standard. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, studying the business card. What if I mess this up too? Then you'll face the consequences. Just like any other employee, but this time, you'll face them knowing that success isn't handed to you because of who your father is. It's earned through how you treat people and how hard you work. I don't deserve this chance. No, I agreed. You don't. But I'm giving it to you anyway because I love you. and because I believe you can become the man I raised you to be." Tyler sat back down, and I saw something different in his face. Not the cocky confidence of the past few years, but something quieter, humbler. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "That night when I called you useless, how much did that hurt?" I sat down across from him and thought about how to answer. "Tyler, I've been in boardrooms with men who could buy and sell companies before lunch. I've had investors yell at me, competitors try to destroy me, and business partners betray me. None of that hurt as much as hearing my son say I was useless and forgotten." Tyler started crying again, but these were different tears. Not the panicked tears of someone who'd lost their job, but the deep, cleansing tears of someone who'd finally understood the weight of their actions. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I know you are. And tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., you'll get the chance to prove it." 6 months later, Tyler has become one of our best junior associates. He arrives early, stays late, and treats everyone from the cleaning crew to the senior executives with equal respect. His supervisor doesn't know he's my son. That's our secret. But she told me last week that Tyler Chen is the most improved employee she's ever managed. "He works like someone who's grateful just to have the opportunity," she said. Last month, Tyler got his first promotion. Not because of his last name, but because he earned it. When I told him the news, he cried again, but this time they were tears of pride. The other day, Jake and Brian came over to watch a game. This time, when they asked about my work, Tyler said something I'll never forget. "My dad? He's the most successful man I know. Not because of what he's built, but because of who he is. I spent years trying to impress you guys by putting him down, and I was an idiot. This man is my hero. Sometimes the best lessons come wrapped in the worst pain, and sometimes when someone you love calls you useless, the most powerful response isn't anger, it's showing them exactly how useful love, patience, and hard-earned wisdom can be." Tyler learned that respect isn't given because of who you are. It's earned because of how you treat others. And I learned that sometimes being a good father means letting your child fall hard enough to appreciate the hand that helps them back up. That's the story of how my son went from calling me useless to calling me his hero. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I questioned whether I was being too harsh. But sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their actions, even when it breaks your heart to watch. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Have you ever had to teach someone a hard lesson about respect? Or maybe you've been on Tyler's side of things, realizing you misjudged someone important in your life. Share your story with us. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. It really helps us reach more people who might need to hear stories like this one. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest content. We share real stories about real people learning life's most important lessons. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and remember, the people who love us most aren't always the ones who give us what we want. Sometimes they're the ones brave enough to give us what we need. See you in the next video.